Here we go. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Smack Talk Live. I am the coach along with Lone Wolf. And though this is a sports talk show and it does involve sports, I'm not sure how deep we're going to get into sports with everything that's going on. Really,
Yeah,
the last couple of days. There's really not too much in the NFL going on because there's no preseason football. Baseball's baseball. We thought the shortened season was going to kind of give baseball some excitement. It hasn't, at least in my
no.
opinion. NHL still kind of plugging along until they get to the conference finals. Ooh, we got some music.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. There's a delay with the intro music sometimes. And
Great.
maybe when I get better internet service, that'll stop. But for now, we just have to deal with it. So that brings us to the NBA,
Right.
which we talked extensively about the NBA and the NBA playoffs last week. This is a little different. Um, I'm gonna let you start, Lone Wolf, because
You
I,
having
I'm
a
at a
hard time?
I'm at a loss for words, really, because I said I didn't want us to talk about this, but it's
Right.
so big, and especially with some of the news that I just texted you about before we came
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
When
Well,
I
and it's
read,
unavoidable. I mean, the games themselves were
right,
postponed, so it's like we can talk about some games that are going on or that had gone on, but there's no games going on at the moment, so we really can't talk about that because
right,
there's
right.
none being played. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to talk about it when it's not actually happening.
So
I think there are a few baseball games being played, or let me see here. I think there might be actually a few games going on right now. So it's not like games were
right,
postponed the other day, and now there are a few games that are actually still going on.
yeah,
And
and
just
I
but
think the most part was that it was NBA. And
right,
I
right,
think a couple of Major League Baseball games got postponed, but it was just
correct.
that day. It was just that
Yes,
day to
yeah,
show
yep,
solidarity. This
right,
this is getting the news that just came out like blew my mind.
yeah. Well,
But
so
let's
here's what I'll say. I mean, let's talk about one thing before we go
right,
to
right,
that. And what I would like to talk about before we get there is you mentioned it in your beginning here. Baseball hasn't really been helped by having the shortened season. It to me it stands out that they bungled the way that this was set up. We said this before, and postponing a few of the games because of this is just another thing on top of all of the things that have gone wrong with the baseball season so far. I know there are games being played right now. It seems like there's still interest, but it really hasn't helped baseball in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I think it's hurt it quite a bit. And I don't know what that's going to look like for them next year, but when you're competing with other major sports for fans, it doesn't look good for baseball the way it. I mean, you still have your diehard fans, but the casual fan won't care. To me, it
right.
just feels like they won't.
And and I guess hosted my brother's show earlier in the week with him because his
Mm-hmm.
co-host had family obligations, and we talked about this for a little bit too. Is
Yeah.
that is there any hope for baseball? And we
Right.
talked about there needs to be a permanent expansion of playoffs, but not in such an expanded format that it's in. Not having over half the league make the playoffs. But
Yeah.
like what my brother brought up was the top two teams in each division qualify. That you
Sure.
get 12 teams in. So that way, if you're that third place team, you're out of winning the division, but you're only like 3, 4 games out of that second place slot.
Sure.
you aren't going to sit there and sell off your entire roster because, well, we don't have a shot for the next 3, 4 years. So let's just
Yeah,
fire sell, reduce our payroll, save money, and hopefully our farm system develops.
right.
I think that's the problem. That that therein lies the problem with Major League Baseball. Too many teams bail not just on like their current season, but they like think they're like sorcerers and can see the future, and then like they fire sell everybody,
Yeah, yeah.
so they're basically telling their fans we're going to be a stink for the next 6 to 10 years.
Right, right.
So
Yeah, I mean, and what good is that? I mean, how do you draw fan interest in a franchise when you're saying you're doing that? Like fans, they want to follow a team because it seems like that team has a plan. So they always talk about what their plan is. Well, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to approach it, and da da da. Well, yeah, because you want to tell the fans there's hope.
right,
Support our team because there's hope. But yeah, when franchises do those sorts of things, there really isn't any hope. I mean, you look at it and you say top to bottom, why am I following this team so fervently? I'm not going to go to their games if they really just kind of jettison their future, for the next 5 years. For a franchise, they may look at it and say, well, whatever, it's a franchise, we have to deal with it. For the fan, those 5 years are 5 full years of them saying, yeah, I'm going to be a casual or not at all fan because I'm not spending all my money on a franchise that feels like it's okay to lose for 5 years in a row.
right, and we've lived through that with the
Yeah,
Sea Legs dumpster firing the Brewers year after year after year.
yeah,
And it's like,
constantly.
what
Yeah,
are you doing? You're not
right,
that bad.
right. Yeah, they weren't,
So
and yeah, so that was kind of like it seemed like their strategy, but yeah, I just overall I just don't feel like baseball has really benefited much from this. I thought maybe they could get some traction and momentum, like we talked about. It doesn't really seem to have found itself yet, and maybe once they get to their postseason in this abbreviated season, that'll change. I don't know. For their sake, they better hope it does, but it doesn't feel like right now there's a lot of interest. So
yeah, and I don't know. I don't know if the postseason is going to help them out. They really need to take this coming up off season and look at baseball as a whole and say, how do we survive?
right.
How do we survive this? Because I don't think they really have, as a league, they don't have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
just don't think they do. Um, so we'll see what happens there. Again, it's that this has kind of been our MO with baseball. It's kind of like
Yeah.
it's we want to talk about it,
Right.
but there's nothing really exciting. I mean, at least when they were having positive COVID tests, there was something to talk about. They're not even having that now, so I guess that's a positive thing, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um, but other than that, it's been kind of a snooze fest, you
And
know.
I think when people listen, I think we've kind of bashed it somewhat, as we talk about it. But I'll say this as opposed to, I mean, we don't hate baseball. We don't want it to fail. We're just looking at it and saying
Right.
it doesn't seem like it's doing the job it needs to succeed. And for all those baseball fans, it's too bad because they should be and could be doing a better job of approaching a lot of the problems that they've had, and they just haven't really done that. So that's it's almost lamenting the fact that they're not doing a good job as opposed to saying that they're trash or something. We're not saying that.
Right.
They could do
That,
better.
that, yeah, they need to have a plan on to make baseball appealing to younger fans. They're holding on to that, you know, the fan base that's our age. And I think we're really that last generation that grew up
Yeah.
where you were taken to a baseball game as like an outing and
Right.
you spend a day at the I mean, I remember going, in scouts, you take a field trip down to County Stadium.
Right.
Okay, well you go down there for a double header a lot of times and you spend the night in a hotel in Milwaukee and come back the next
Yeah.
day. You don't. see that stuff anymore.
Right.
And so they have to find a way to pique the interest of the younger fan base that has not grown up with baseball in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and until they do that, they're going to continue to struggle getting fan interest.
Right.
It's not about, the demographics of your players. They can say that. It's not. It's not about that you have a low margin of, African American baseball players and this and that. It's nothing like that. That's not the reason
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that baseball's struggling. It's I don't care who you have playing. It's just not exciting.
Right.
Yeah, it's exciting when you have like home runs being hit, or like the other night there was a no hitter pitched.
Right. Yes.
I believe by the White Sox.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so those things, but they're so rare. And now I'm not saying that they should curtail rules and have no hitters right and left, but I'm one of those fans. I'm not going to sit around and watch and wait years and years and years to watch a guy pitch a no hitter. Just not
Right.
going to do it. I have other things to do that interest me. So,
Yeah, and it is
um,
cool, and it's obviously a great achievement for him to be able to do that. It's just that, um, you know, the level of excitement that's there isn't quite the same as some of the other sports. And I mean, you can call it good, bad, or indifferent when you look at it, but that's we don't live in a culture that looks for that kind of more slow paced sport. And I mean, I hate to say that, but that's just kind of how it is. And people want more, rapid entertainment when they're watching something. So, um, if you think that's bad, you can complain about it. But at the same time, as an owner of a team, as the league itself, you have to deal with it because that's your fan base. And
hmm
if you don't like it, that's one thing. But if it's the reality of it, so you still have to market to the consumers who are out there, and that's just
right,
how it is.
exactly.
So
It, and the one positive thing in all this, hey, if you're a Major League Baseball player right now and with no fans, for some of these teams, it's probably you probably don't even notice the difference because during day games you don't get that many fans anyways.
yeah, yeah.
That's
I
the
mean,
first
really,
thing
yeah,
that the weekday day games make no sense.
yeah,
They make no sense. Playing a 11 o'clock game on a Wednesday makes no sense.
right,
Makes no sense. Who who's going?
yeah,
The retired, unemployed, or the people that might have a day off that are diehard baseball fans. That's
yeah,
about it.
right,
That's about it.
right,
People are not going to take a day off to be like, I'm going to go to this 11 o'clock a.m. baseball game. I'm going to
right.
take a
No, it just
vacation
doesn't
day
make
to do
sense.
that.
Yeah,
They're not going to do that.
yeah,
So they need to do something. I floated this idea out there to a couple people a few days ago. It's way out of normal, never happen.
hmm,
Reduce the game to 7 innings.
right,
Just permanently reduce games to 7 innings.
yeah, yeah,
Something to change
hmm,
it up. Make it where you don't have this elongated period to come back from 4 runs down.
yeah,
You know, that's the thing. It's like this day and age with the way teams can get hot. If you're get down even 5, 6 runs in this third inning, that game's not over yet.
no, not at all. Yeah,
It's far from over. But now if you only
right,
have 7 innings and then the third inning you're down by six, now the pressure's starting to come on.
right,
You take
definitely.
these so stuff like that. I think they
Yeah,
have to look at. Will that ever happen? Absolutely not. Owners, players union will not do that. The die hard, you know,
yeah. You're ruining the sanctity of baseball if
yeah,
you do something like
exactly.
that. That kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So,
but it bears
um,
looking at those things to see if you want to jumpstart it and you want to bring in the more casual fan. So
yeah, you have to do something. So, um, NFL, not too much going on. Yeah,
right,
we have Earl Thomas out on the market right now. Rumors are possibly Dallas, San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco. Um, you know, but again, the other day on my brother's show, we talked about this. There had to be something else that happened or an underlying circumstance there that they would just outright release him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There's
Yeah,
no way that just because he hit a teammate in practice
right.
that you release a Pro Bowler, possibly a Hall of Fame safety.
The guy's a great player. I mean, the bottom
Right,
line, he's a really great player. So you can't look at it and say, well, yeah, he. It's not like there was something out and out. They got rid of him because he's facing felony counts for X, Y, and
right.
Z. That's. So no, you don't just get rid of a great player because of no reason. Yeah, that wouldn't make any sense at all. Yep.
Because there's people hit teammates right and left at these practices. They get heated in the moment, and there's scuffles at practices all the time. So there had to be more to it that they're just not releasing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it'll be interesting to see where he lands. But I think he's going
Maybe
to
it's a
ask for.
culmination of a lot of different things. I mean, there's some, talk about him. He had some excuses for not coming to practices and things of that nature. And like you said, he hit a teammate. And there's got to be a lot, like you said, more going on there than is really being released at this point. You kind of have to piece that together. But, eventually it'll come out and we'll know why.
Yeah.
But a player of his caliber is going to get snatched up by somebody, very soon.
You eventually, I think it all depends on how much he's going to ask for. He'll probably sign a
Yeah,
1 year deal, just to play this season somewhere and then go back into free agency in the summer, next off season
right.
and get a nice payday. It will be interesting. I think this does kind of downgrade Baltimore a little bit. I think that has a big impact on their defense.
It definitely
Um,
does. Yeah.
so I think that puts another kink in the Baltimore armor. It's
Right.
going to make it harder for them to compete with like the Chiefs, who offensively are going to be a juggernaut.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
there's something big happened behind the scenes there because knowing who they have to go to get to the Super Bowl, and you get rid of one of the best safeties in the league, this
Yeah.
isn't just a fist fight.
No,
It's just not a
no,
fist fight.
no, not
So
at all. I mean, you absolutely hit it on the head. From a football standpoint, you don't get rid of a player like that, knowing that the AFC playoffs are going to feature the best offense in the league. You
right,
just you don't. Yeah, I mean,
right.
so
Um, the other news that I think is worth just a brief discussion. San Francisco 49ers are having horrible injury issues at the wide receiver. I mean, they're looking at they even brought Kevin White in for a tryout. I mean, they're signing
yeah,
anybody and everybody. We're talking. People are talking about how desperate the Packers might be for receivers. At least we know who we have.
right.
The 49ers don't even know who's going to be suiting up week one.
No, no,
I mean,
and I mean, yeah, and that was like they brought in Kevin White, who he busted on the Bears. I mean, you bring that guy in, it's like you must be really desperate. I mean, the guy's got
right,
some potential, maybe, but still, there's some desperation there.
right, exactly. And that's the thing. It's like they are not. I don't think that the 49er offense is going to be even near to what they were last year. I think their offensive line gelled and they were hitting on all cylinders, and it didn't matter who was at running back. If the 49ers wide receivers are in this much disarray and teams know Garoppolo is not going to pass on you to beat you, you're stacking the box this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And you're telling Garoppolo, beat us.
right.
And that's what I would do because I don't think he can do it on a consistent basis. Yeah, he can beat he'll be able to beat like the Rams in those lower tier teams in the league.
Sure. Right.
He's not beating Seattle that way. He's not
No,
beating. I don't even think he could beat the Eagles, Cowboys, or Packers that way.
no, I agree. Yeah, I mean, I
You
think
know?
he showed that. Um, I don't think there were. I'm thinking back to the Super Bowl, and I'm thinking about times when he needed to make a play where it just didn't happen. It felt more like the 49ers got ahead in that first half, but it wasn't really, to me, attributable to anything he did in particular, other than maybe not making a mistake or something like that. I just haven't seen from him the ability to do, and I mean, he's not Patrick Mahomes, and I get that. So, fine, but he didn't even really kind of do more than manage. He just didn't really do much. And if his receiver core is that depleted, then they're in trouble. The only
Yeah,
person they said was who's supposed to be back is Brandon Ayuk, uh, potentially by the beginning of the season, maybe.
maybe, but he's a rookie.
Right, he's a rookie. Yeah, he's good and he's got speed and everything, but he's a rookie. So
He's a
yeah,
rookie.
yeah, right.
You know, um, so that I think that's something to you know to keep our eye on with that. Um,
It's very significant, I think. Yeah, yeah,
because I do think that could definitely open the door for any of the other top teams in the NFC. It definitely
sure.
opens the door for
Packers,
Seattle,
Saints. Yeah,
um, the
Seattle. Yep.
Saints, the Packers, the Cowboys, the Eagles, because I think those
Right.
those right there, I think are the contending teams. I don't think any other team in the NFC is going to compete. The Vikings will be around 500 maybe. It all really
Yeah.
depends on how their new secondary works.
Right. Yep.
So
Yep.
we'll see there. Other than that, in the NFL, there isn't much. Was it?
No, outside of
mm,
relating to the big topic that we have, but yeah.
and we'll mention that when we get to the big topic.
Right. Yeah.
Um, as far as the NHL, again, it's just they're going along. The only surpriser is the New York Islanders, continuing to play well, for being one of the lower seeds. Um, and my brother brought this up. If you get a hot goalie in the playoffs, you can go somewhere. And right
Right.
now, they're playing really good defense and getting really good goaltending. So it
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprising to see them at least get to the conference finals.
And
Um,
I don't think in hockey, if you look at it, it's all that shocking or surprising for a lower seeded team to do that in the postseason. You know, and maybe that's different in other sports. I don't know, but at least for me, looking at it, like you just said, if you're playing good defense and principally your goalie is really locked in the postseason, you can do really well as a lower seed. The disparity between some of the top teams and the bottom teams isn't all maybe that much, depending on the year. I mean, sometimes there are just a couple teams that are really, really just better than everybody else. Um, but yeah, you definitely can see that in hockey, and kudos to them. I know somebody who I work with who's a fan, so he's always giving me updates about how they're doing. So
Yeah, and we saw that. I don't remember how many years ago now. It's at least 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, I think it was the Blackhawks' second Stanley Cup. That
yes,
the first one that they won, they were just dominant. They had such a great team and they were playing so well, and they just went through everybody. But
right,
then like 2 years later, they won it again, and they were like the sixth or seventh seed.
right,
They,
yeah,
they were
yep,
they barely made the playoffs, but they got hot at the right time, and they ended up winning the Stanley Cup.
right,
So it's like you said, it is not as shocking in hockey um, as in other sports
right. Yeah,
for
I don't
for a
think
lower
so.
seed to win. So anything else actually sports related before we get to our main topic of conversation tonight?
No, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head here. So
I
for
mean,
once, we're not talking about the coronavirus.
Yes.
So that's
Um,
good.
and
Steer away
if
from that.
if we do have time at the end, we'll talk about the WIAA, which is the
Yeah,
Wisconsin Interscholastic Athletic Association, per request of your dad.
that's right. He wants it. He
So
wants us to mention it. At least get in
once
a little bit of time in there. So
and we'll see if we don't talk about this week, we'll get it in the show next week because
yeah,
um, I'll know I'll have even more information next week because we'll be literally days away from the beginning of our football season. So,
right.
um, but the big topic today, yeah,
Yeah,
and I'm gonna preface this again. I said I don't like talking about this as a sports show,
right, right.
um, but um, I understand why we need to because it does affect sports.
Yeah.
So
In this
I
case, pretty
must
much completely.
right. I'm going to just lay out, I guess, the parameters of what happened.
Hmm.
I don't remember what day it was that actually occurred, but a couple days ago. Um, Individual, and I'm not going to use names in the show. If you want to look up names, you can look up the names on the internet.
Right,
It's all over the place. Down in Kenosha, was shot by an officer multiple times,
right.
um, sent to the hospital. Nothing confirmed. He did. He is going to survive, but all the reports are saying he's probably going to be paralyzed from the waist down for life,
Right.
um, which led to protesting, which led to the riots and looting, um,
Right.
which we've talked about numerous that we're fine with the protesting. We get that. We understand that.
Yep. Yep.
And I don't think anybody's going to argue against that. If you want to go and peacefully protest what you
Right.
feel is an
I mean, I'm
injustice,
sure there's probably a few people who would, but I think they're wrong, and
right?
you have the right to peacefully protest. You
Exactly,
absolutely
exactly.
do. Yeah.
And but we are strongly against when those turn into riots and looting.
Yeah.
And what happened there was they burned a church that had Black Lives Matter sign in the front yard of the church. They burned
Yeah.
the church to the ground. They burned a used car dealership. They burned a probation and parole building. They did all these things. And again, I don't get what that is going to do
Yeah.
to get the changes that you want. To be honest, and I'll get into more of this even later once we talk about how this is affecting sport, is that you are taking people that understand that there's issues with some, not all law enforcement,
Hmm.
and that there does need to be some changes made.
Right.
Because we were texting back and forth last night, and we'll get into some the details later because there's some stuff that an individual stated before all the facts were out that he
Yeah.
kind of was hypocritical over a course of time and a couple different topics, and and we were on kind of different pages, with this,
Hmm.
but we agree that the one thing we did agree upon is that the 7 shots doesn't make sense. The why you had to fire the firearm 7 times
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely. It's
doesn't make
excessive
sense.
no
So
matter
so
what.
so
Yeah. Yep.
obviously there needs to be change there. But as details came out, the individual resisted arrest. They attempted to tase him. It
Yep.
didn't work. He admitted to the DOJ, who's doing an independent investigation, that he was in possession of a knife when the officers fired the gun.
Yeah.
So there are two sides of this, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Was the officer justified in discharging the firearm? I believe he was. I don't believe he needed to fire it 7 times.
Right.
Okay, so I don't want people to say like, "Oh, see, you don't." No, I under.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
not saying that
Yeah.
shooting the guy 7 times, and we don't know if all 7 shots hit him because I think if he would have been shot that close proximity 7 times, he probably would not have survived. So I'm wondering if the officer missed a couple shots. That has not been relayed of how many shots actually struck the individual. Whether it's 1, 2, 3, 7 shots, probably didn't need to be that many. You know, in the one thing I'm just gonna go before I let you talk, and kind of lead us the rest of the way here, is that I don't want to hear people say, "Well, shoot him in the arm. Just shoot him in the arm." If I shoot you in the arm and you have adrenaline rushing through you, you are still gonna be able to come at me with a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Shooting you in the arm in that type of tense situation is a lot harder than you think it is. Right. We're sitting here nice, calm. Oh, just shoot him in the arm, shoot him in the leg. Well, yeah, when it's a nice, calm situation, you can say that. You know, I've never been in a situation when I was working in corrections that I had to use pepper spray or actually physically take somebody to the ground. But I took hundreds of people into custody, taking them away from their families for different violations.
Right.
Even those where they get tense and they're getting verbally aggressive, you start to get tense and you have to try to stay calm. There were multiple times where my thought process is, if he does this, I'm taking him to the ground.
Right.
So
well, and you have to react to the situation based on the training that you've been given, right? I mean, exactly. You were trained, and these officers were trained as well. So
right, and there's always a rule, you know, that we had, and then we trained, because I was one of the trainers for our self-defense tactics for our other agents, is that no, by any means, you protect yourself and your coworkers.
Right.
And we'll sort everything out. And I'm sure law enforcement has the same thing. Make sure that you get home safely. Whether you believe that's correct or not, that's fine. But again, they're highly intense, stressful situations that a split-second decision has to be made.
Right.
Again, I'm not saying the officer is right in discharging the firearm 7 times. I do believe he was justified in incapacitating him. Again, the amount of times he fired, I don't agree with. So I'm kind, you know, you can say, "Oh, you're skirting the line. You're trying not to offend anybody." I'm just telling you what I feel.
Yeah.
And if no matter what I say, somebody one side is going to be offended or another. You know, I support law enforcement, but at the same time, I know that there are bad law enforcement officers out there and there needs to be change.
And you probably dealt with some of them in your job.
I mean, correct. You know, I mean, I've dealt with some pretty bad law enforcement officers. I worked in Milwaukee for almost 2 years.
Right.
So I get it, but at the same time, I'm not going to sit there and say all cops are bad.
Yeah,
because there are
it's
other
just a blanket statement. It doesn't work.
Right. So that's where I'm at with the the situation that happened. There's a total nother side that I'm
gonna we have to get to on the sports
that we have to get to. So exactly. I'm gonna let you go over, and I'm gonna respond when you're done with your piece.
Sure. And so what I would say, you know, on my end is, to me, it feels like it's indicative of a larger problem, and I think that's what the issue is for people, is that the injustice of the way that this happened, you know. But I want people to have all the facts. So I'm glad that you brought up the fact that, you know, the man in question was a criminal, had a criminal record, and had been going for a weapon at the time. So the officers that are in that situation have to respond to that knowing that the person has a weapon. Now, it's not a gun, but I don't think that the officers know that at the time. They don't know what the person is doing. and you respond based on your training. Now, what I will say though, and to me, I don't think there's any excuse for it. There's no need to discharge your firearm that many times in that type of situation. And I know that's not part of their training. It has to. It can't be. Um, they have to be trained to incapacitate, and I feel like 7 times is just. I don't want to say it's ridiculous, but I mean, I've never been in that situation, so I do not know the mentality when you're holding that gun and somebody you don't know what somebody's going to do. But it seems no way, no how can you say that that's not excessive, in my opinion. Um, so I look at that and I say, okay, there's two parts to it. The officer, both of them had to respond in some fashion, and then when they did respond, I think you can, and at some point, you'd have to have some rationality to it. I don't know. It just seemed like it was very excessive to me. Um, I think the issue that people have is that it's the inequality of these types of situations that comes out. You just had another situation not that long ago in Minnesota where same type of thing happened, and that person lost his life. So now you have something else, and I think a lot of people are just really expressing their frustration at these overall. So now when it comes to sports, um, you know, I think what do people do? What is their response to this? And I guess that was the thought process. How can we affect change? We have to do something drastic in order to make people see that we can affect change because people aren't listening otherwise. That's what it felt like to me when they did that. And we can get into that even more deeply, but just on the surface, that's what it seems like to me.
Yeah,
So,
and when it comes to sport, and I said this before, and I
mm-hmm.
understand, again, you know, what happened with George Floyd, that what that officer did, um, is egregious. He needs to be held accountable if his actions cause, even were a part of George Floyd dying. I'm not going to get into all the details. So again, I'm not going to regurgitate
Right,
that
right, yep,
situation.
yep,
There's
exactly,
evidence
yeah,
coming out with that, and of course the defense is going to say this. Oh, look at the medical report. He had this much fentanyl in the system. Blah blah blah. Neither here nor there. Um,
right,
there's a trial going on. Hopefully, the justice hopefully will be served there. Um, and what my hope is there is no matter what the outcome there is, hopefully people see that this went through the criminal justice system
right,
and there's a jury of peers
right,
that are in the community that are going to make this decision.
yep,
And that's all I'm going to say because that there's a lot of new stuff coming out, and this isn't about the George Floyd situation. We talked about that when it first happened.
mm-hmm.
Um, and I get, that sports teams want to stand together in solidarity for change. And I'm fine with that. What I can't tolerate anymore is, and I'm going to say it, the ignorance of these athletes that make these comments before all information is out there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I'm gonna say it. I'm just gonna call it out. Like right here. I mean,
Yeah,
Green Bay just officially declared racism a public health crisis.
right,
Racism is bad. I agree. We need to distinguish it. I, we don't need declarations to tell us racism is bad.
right,
Um,
right. I mean,
but
yeah, yeah,
but so LeBron James, I'm going to say LeBron James came out and he said that he is disgusted with this stuff, that the officers could have attempted to take, and I'll say the last, Mr. Blake down to the ground and
Yeah,
detain him and tackle him and do all these other things. They didn't need to shoot him.
right,
Guess
right,
what, LeBron? They tried that. It didn't work. So the way it works is you try verbal de-escalation to get the person to comply. When they say
yep,
no, you try hands-on, physical detainment. They attempted
right,
that. They had him on the ground. There's video that shows him wrestling with law enforcement. He gets
right,
away. A taser's deployed. It doesn't work. That the
right,
last thing that they have, and I'm not saying again, I'm not saying that's 100% always right to use a firearm, but their
right,
last option is their firearm, and they were
yeah,
to it.
right,
That's where they were at. So again, it's a horrible that somebody gets shot and gets paralyzed. I'm not saying that that's okay, and I'm not saying 7 shots are okay. But when people sit there and say, well, they could have just done this, they did those things. And if you just make a vanilla statement when it first happens and says, this is a bad situation, yada, 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 let's see what the information is, and then make an informed decision once all the information happens,
yeah.
that's
Well,
how
and
it
I
should be
think,
handled.
yeah, I think, Coach, you look at it and players are, in this unique situation because a guy like him has a lot of influence when he says something. So if he says it's horrible, then a lot of people simply, right or wrong, believe that it's horrible because he said it was horrible. Um, a lot of players, I think, look back and say, I wasn't a role model and you shouldn't treat me like one. Like Charles Barkley had said when he was playing, I am not a role model. He'd come out and he's
Right.
famous for saying that I am not a role model. Do not follow what I do. Do
And,
not,
and,
get in
and he,
fights in nightclubs, and he's not a
and,
role model. He said that. He
and,
just don't
and
don't
he, and
listen
he,
to me.
and, and he continues to say that today.
Right, right.
You know,
And but I think a lot of these guys, they do portray themselves as a community leader or somebody who sponsors causes. And so when you do those things, then you are a role model. You're making yourself out to be one. So what you say carries a lot of weight. Was the act of doing that an egregious act? I think it was. I think it was excessive. But to your point, you need to know the whole story before you say. I mean, if you just say in a vacuum, I shot you in the back 7 times, coach. And so somebody would say, oh my God, how could you do that? That's horrible. But if they knew the whole story, well, then you look at it in a different light. But no matter how you look at it, I think even with all the facts, I think that act in and of itself was not necessary at all. Um, but knowing all of those things, I think that act maybe is something that will get that officer in trouble, depending on what the investigation will find. Um, but in terms of sports and athletes looking at it, I think they're probably just tired of having to deal with this as an issue and wondering what uh, I mean, let's just be honest and let's just be a little bit fair. In my opinion, okay, if I'm driving down the street and there's another vehicle right next to me and there's a black man in driving down the street, I hate to say it, but I think even in today's America, if I'm speeding and he's speeding, he's probably going to get pulled over as opposed to me. I still feel like there is
right.
that undercurrent of racism in our country, unfortunately, and that's something I think that
Well, and I
you know
And I agree with that.
Yeah,
And those are
yeah,
and that's where I agree that there does need to
right,
be changes made. We need to address that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
But there are, I think, different ways to handle it than
hmm,
rioting and looting.
yeah,
And then basically you have these very prominent figures, whether they're athletes or actors and actresses,
hmm,
that they don't come out and say, stop rioting and looting, protest, don't, but stop the rioting, stop the looting. They're basically right there with them, but just not physically there. That's what my feeling is. Nobody has
yeah.
come out and said, "Hey, we're all for the protesting because we all want change, but let's stop destroying our communities." Because here's the thing, what communities are they destroying? The communities that need the most help already. They're not destroying the wealthy suburb community. They're
Right.
destroying the downtown community of the city they need and that they
That they
already need
live in.
help
Yeah.
in. So that's my issue here is that you I have no problem with change, and I agree that there needs to be change. There needs to be accountability for when that stuff happens. But the way that it's being going about right now,
Hmm.
I think is um, just wrong. I think there's
Yeah. Yeah.
a better way to do it. And I'm trying to find the article that I read here,
Well, I think to me,
and because I want the
um, w-
quotes.
yeah. What I'll say while you're looking for
Um,
that particular article is, um, I look at just athletes and acting as human beings and saying what they feel, and they have every right to do that. And I think people need to look at them more as human beings so they have the chance to be able to. But what I will say about the rioting and everything else is this, you know, yes, there were some instances in the 60s when things like this happened. However, one of the greatest leaders of a movement for freedom and for equality was Martin Luther King Jr. And he never, to
mm-hmm.
my knowledge, and somebody can call me out on it and they can say I'm wrong, but I will stand by this. He never condoned that sort of violence. His message was, we're here, we're going to overcome, but we're not going to do it in an anarchistic rebellion sort of way. That's not the message. It's a message of peace and understanding and unity. And I think that community needs to look at his message. Everybody needs to look at his message and say, this is the way we need to go about this. But I don't see that voice right now, and maybe I'm just not seeing it, but I don't see that voice right now, and so I think everybody is taking it upon themselves, and sports gets the news because it's a big topic right now because they came back, and then they postponed their play because of these things that are happening. But um, yeah, you're
Right,
destroying your own community. Don't do that. Don't do
right,
that. Don't destroy your own community. Peacefully protest in the way Dr. King would protest.
right. Exactly, and that's the thing, because I'm going to tell you this, and we'll wrap up this topic with our final response on this. I really
Yeah.
think that the actions that are being taken to help effect change is taking a mental toll on people that they not that they don't care. So
Right.
I want to make sure listeners understand this. I'm not saying they don't care, but they're getting to a point where they're tuning it out because they're tired of turning on the TV or looking at their Facebook feed and seeing another city burning to the ground, and
Yeah.
they're having a hard time supporting communities that are going to burn their communities to the ground because they want change. Um,
Right.
and I'll tell you right now, I mean, Minneapolis is a great example of this. So after George Floyd, they have the riots. They
Mm-hmm.
caused over, I think it was $55 million in damage.
Right.
And then the Minneapolis government had the audacity, and I'm going to say it, to ask the federal government for that money. I'm sorry, that's part of our tax money, Lone Wolf. Why should we pay to rebuild the community you burned down?
Right. 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 Yeah.
You burned your
Yeah.
community
I mean,
down.
yeah.
Why should we pay to rebuild
Yeah.
it?
Right.
And that's where I think people are starting to tune this out.
Yeah. I mean, the better
Because
response to me in that situation is, as a community, you work together to rebuild your community. That human beings live in communities, so work together to do that. That should be would be a better response. And there are ways of
right,
doing that. There are organizations that help people in doing that. You know, Habitat for Humanity, American Red Cross. There's
right.
all sorts of nonprofit organizations that will work with the government and the people in the community to rebuild it. So to me, that would be
It,
a better response.
well, and see, and here's another example. Again, in Minneapolis, this was, I believe, yesterday. Law enforcement responded to an individual who was
Mm-hmm.
a person of interest in a homicide that had happened earlier. They made contact with the individual. The individual committed suicide. What do? People protest, turned into a riot, and started burning down businesses again.
Right.
This wasn't even a death by cop, but that's what people are saying. The cops caused that death.
Right.
The
Right.
individual was a person of interest in a homicide, and
Yeah.
he turned a weapon on himself. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know all the details because that situation was, I think, quashed relatively quickly after a couple buildings were set on fire and looted.
Right.
I know
Right.
Target was again looted. I mean, I don't know how many more Targets can get looted in Minneapolis before they say we're just not going to have any Target stores
I mean,
there.
they're gonna bar the gates
Um,
or something. I don't know
but
what they're gonna do, but yeah, and to me, that's
right,
again, that's not the
so
response that you would want or need in this situation. So,
right,
but
so
I think so for us. I think
here
yeah, you go ahead, coach. It's fine. Yep.
so again, and yeah, I'm kind of at the point where if you get mad at me, if you listen to this, you get mad at me for what I'm saying, things like that. You do. Um,
Hmm.
Again, I'm just going to continue the process. I am not condoning the actions. I agree that there are issues that need to be looked at and changed, but it's the way things are going about, and in the responses of high profile individuals.
Hmm.
And right now, that happens to be LeBron James. And guess what, Mr. LeBron? I came out last week and said the Lakers should trade you, and I'm really behind that right now. Um, because here, remember before the season, there's an incident with the NBA and
Hmm.
a country called China.
Yeah. Yeah. I do
Okay,
remember that. Yes.
where the Houston Rocket general manager said that we needed to stand with the people of China because of human rights violations, things like that. And there, let me see if I may. So Daryl Morey tweeted, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong." Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
there's been a lot of backlash there. The businesses and in China basically cut ties with the Rockets NBA. He was forced to apologize and things like that. And Mr. James, I'm not even going to call you LeBron. I'm going to call you Mr. James now. You came out and said we all have freedom of speech, but at times there are ramifications for negative that can happen. I don't want to get into a feud with Daryl, but I believe he wasn't educated on the situation at hand, and he spoke. Some of the people have been harmed, and not financially, but physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Okay, what I want to focus on here, Lone Wolf, is I
Yeah.
believe he wasn't educated on the situation. So we go back now to the current situation,
Right.
and he, Mr. James says this. If you watch the video, there's multiple moments where if they wanted to, they could have tackled him. They could have grabbed him. They could have done that.
Right.
They did
Oh,
try
right.
that. So, Mr. James, you were not educated on the situation. This is where you need to be educated on the situation before you comment on it. This is the issue that I have. These are the things.
Yep.
Okay.
And I will,
And this is really,
yeah, yeah, yep.
this doesn't even, isn't, again, that now we're getting away from the situation because I think we've addressed that. Now this is the issue
Right.
with the these, I'm going to say it's celebrities making comments when they don't know all the facts.
Yeah. And I think
That's my
too,
biggest issue.
you look at it, and LeBron and Kawhi Leonard were two of the people who had made the push for the teams not to finish the playoffs. And I think, and I'll give them a little bit of credit here, because I will say that they were in the heat of the moment and it was an emotional response. And when they came back to it, they made the decision to go ahead. And LeBron James actually reversed course on this and did say, we should continue to play. From what I saw just recently, within the last few hours in reading some articles, that he did reverse course on it and agree to play. But absolutely, I agree. You have to get the facts before you make a comment. And I would say that for anybody. Okay, so
Right.
don't think we're just picking
Right.
on him,
Right. I'm,
because there
I,
are people all the time that sound
right.
off about stuff without getting
I
all
mean,
the facts.
I mean, Aaron Rodgers made comments about the situation too without having all the details.
Exactly. Yeah.
I brought this up specifically because he called another individual out on the same thing.
And the same thing, exactly. Yes, yeah. So don't
Yeah, yes,
call
it wasn't
somebody out on it when you do the same thing, because it just
right.
makes you a hypocrite. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And that's why I picked this situation. But yes,
Yep.
you're right. There's so many high profile individuals that make comments before they know all the information. And I think
Right.
that is why I think the NBA teams voted to continue the playoffs, because yes, I think they kind of their thought process. I think they aren't going to come out and say it, but I think it falls in line with what we're saying. Horrible
Mm-hmm.
situation, but
Right.
now that we got more information, okay, we're going to stand in solidarity for the
Right.
change so people don't
Right.
get shot. But at the same time, we're not going to sit here and protest the rest of the season because okay, there were other dynamic things in the situation that we didn't know when we said we're not going to play.
Yeah. And I
I,
think they
there,
got to look at it realistically and say, they acknowledged it. They clearly took a stand on the issue loudly for the entire world. I'll say it because the NBA really is a sport that I think a lot of other countries pay attention to, for everybody to see. And then, is it sufficient to make the changes that they're looking for? No. But if you sat out and you rationally thought this, if you sat out for the rest of your season, would that be enough to make those changes? Probably not. So I think that's where you have to say, okay, they looked at it, they were rational about it. They said, okay, we're going to continue to play this the rest of the season. That's what we want to do. That's what the players want to do. That's their livelihood, and they're going to do that.
Right. Um, so yeah, and that was the thing too. You had all but two teams vote to continue the playoffs,
Right.
and that must have been a different article you read. The article I read indicated that the Clippers and Lakers were the two teams that did not want to continue the playoffs, and that they
Right.
were in talks about just those two saying we're done.
Yeah.
Again, that must have been information that came out even after I had read that article, because the article I read, the Lakers and Clippers were thinking we're done. So
Right.
you know,
And I had read that same thing too. I was just perusing a variety of articles beforehand, and I think that I had seen that had changed. They had changed their mindset about it. Now I don't know if that held in terms of the vote, but as far as the players were concerned, I had heard that he had made a change too. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I don't think so, because I was looking at some of these other sources, various reporters tweeting this information out. So I'm relying on them
right,
and what they had. And it says here, Yahoo sources, there was a change in position from last night with LeBron James, among others, relaying it was in their best interest to finish out the season.
right,
So that's what I was reading. That was a tweet
okay.
from a reporter in the
Which,
bubble.
which I think is good, because to be honest, I really think you if the majority of teams say we're going to continue, and your
Mm-hmm.
team says no because you say I don't want us to play. Again, I understand your position and your thought process, but again, like you said, Lone Wolf, is
Yeah.
it going to affect and bring the change you want? And I think that they obviously, I think, came to the conclusion that it would not. So my question is, and how I kind of want to wrap this up is, with all this stuff, because I had brought this up weeks ago when the
Mm-hmm.
when the NBA and everybody came out and they're going to put the Black Lives Matter on the courts. They're going to
Right.
do the a black national anthem and NFL games, things like that. How do you think fans are going to be receptive to this? Do you think that fans are just, because I said it, people
Yeah.
watch sports, go to sporting events for an escape.
Right.
They want to get away from the reality of life. And athletes can disagree with me. They cannot like it. But the matter of fact is, they are entertainers.
Mm-hmm.
Through their sport, they entertain their fans. And that's why fans watch them. That's why fans buy their merchandise.
Right. Right.
I'm telling you right
Yeah,
now,
I mean,
there
for
are.
the most part, I would say
Right.
that's probably true. Yeah, unless
Yeah.
you really follow an individual
Right.
and their career closely, and you're really tied to it. Most fans follow it because they want to be entertained by the sport itself.
Right. If you say you're a huge Aaron Rodgers fan, and the Packers come out and say we're gonna put have a patch for Mr. Blake on our jerseys, do you think that's going to increase sales? for fans?
Right.
Do you think they're going to run out and buy Aaron Rodgers jerseys now because they have this patch on it? Some
Yeah.
will, but here's the thing, and this is, and again, I know I'm treading a line here
Yeah.
with individuals, but whether it's not, I'm not saying that's right, but there are fans out there that do not, they might not, I'm not saying that they don't, again, don't think that there's racism, things like that, but they just don't want to care about the issue. They
Yeah.
just they're in their bubble, they're in their life, they don't worry themselves about things going on in the world. That's their prerogative. I'm not saying
Mm-hmm.
that's right, but again, you have fans like that this could turn them off.
Sure.
And my question to you, Lone Wolf, is how do you think that, luckily it was only, one game for the NBA. The NBA's are going to
Right.
resume this weekend. Playoffs are going to resume this weekend. So I don't know if they're just canceled the games and they're going to reschedule like game 5 or if the Bucks forfeited that game. I don't know how this is even working,
I, I
but
don't think that they are. I think that they're just going to replay those games.
okay.
Is from what I read, and I think that was the case. They were just going to continue and play those games as opposed to any forfeit or anything like that.
Okay.
I think so.
So
Yeah.
so how do you think this is going to affect fan perception? Do you think that this is going to help the NBA players bring fans more aware and give them more support with the issue? Or do you think fans are just finally to that point of like we're kind of over it? We 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 just want to watch you play basketball. And again, I can't blame those people that want that because when I get home, last thing I want to do is deal with other stuff. I just want to kind of
Right.
relax and not think about things happening in the world. But unfortunately,
Well,
we
and
have
I think it will be off putting to fans. And again, whether that's right or wrong, I mean, I I think part of the issue is that it should be off putting to people in a way to raise an awareness for an issue to make people do something about it. Um, and so there's some of that plays into the fact that that's why this is happening is because if you talk about it enough, the part of the problem is though this, okay, you want to raise awareness and you want people to be on your side and you want people to understand the issue, but what you're talking about and what you don't want to do is you don't want to alienate people by making them tired of it, and that's the fine line you have to walk with this, and that's where you could end up with, and these people aren't bad people when they look at it, they're
right,
just tired of hearing about it, so you could alienate those people from supporting your cause because of the actions that you're taking. And I mean, there are others who would say, well, that's wrong and that's an injustice. It might be, but how do you reach those people that you want to reach about it without inundating them with all this stuff and saying, okay, now I'm just kind of tired of it, I don't want to think about that. So it's not an easy situation, but yeah, you could run into that, and that is definitely something when you're talking about this, that could be a problem for the casual, regular, well, not casual, the regular fan, the fan who watches, just like you said, wants to come home, watch the game, not think about politics or
right,
class wars, race wars, all these other things
right.
that yeah,
And I agree. I am fine with raising awareness, but like you said, there is a fine line,
yeah,
and it goes from celebrities, athletes, and down to and I'm not going to put the protesters in this group because there are a lot of peaceful protests going on, and that's great. That's how it
right,
should be handled. That's like you
yep,
said earlier, Lone Wolf. That's what Martin Luther King Jr. wanted to be done.
right, yeah, yep,
But then you have the celebrities, and then the rioters and looters, you're starting to get people to come off that line where you're making them aware and supporting it to I'm done. I
Right.
just
You're turning
I
them
meant
off to the cause that you're supporting. Yeah. Yeah.
right. And again, not saying that that's right for those people to do that, because if we as a society peacefully put pressure on our elected officials, positive
Hmm.
change can happen. But when you start pushing those people off that support line to okay, I it's just it's going to continue to happen. So I'm not dealing with this. Um,
Yeah.
you're when you need the support of the society to pressure our elected officials to make the change, you're not going to have it. And again, I'm not saying stuff is right or wrong. I think we both said numerous times we support change, but
Yes.
we're
Definitely.
looking at it from all sides and all points of view, and that's what this
Hmm.
discussion is about. We are not saying
Right.
one thing is right, definitely right. One thing is definitely wrong. The one thing we can agree upon that there is issues, there does need to be change. But how the change is
I
being,
mean, look,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, you said we needs to change. So, we've got some options, and that's really what we're saying. And I think, with we talked about sports and being affected by this, but just as a general thing, um, if rioting and looting, that's something that is akin to at some point just open rebellion and anarchy. And we're definitely not advocating that as a
right,
solution to this issue. So that's where I think you have to say, okay, if that's the route you want to go, you're going to have to go that route without support from people because they don't want that. They don't want society to be
right,
upended. Now, I mean, I think you can make change without
right.
having to go down that road, and I think that's
So do
really what we're
I.
saying is you can make change without having to overturn the government or abolish police or whatever the case may be.
Right.
Open anarchy is not the answer.
And that's the thing too. I think those people, those individuals that want to totally get rid of police, you're really off putting a lot of people that would be supportive of reform on how law enforcement
Hmm.
is trained, the standards that officers have to go through. Um, the I'm not gonna say tactics that they use, because again, you can be the best verbal tactician out there, and you may find yourself having to use a physical alternative. That's just
Right.
unfortunately the way humans are. You don't know how they're going to react.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but there are, I think, you know things that law enforcement could do to prevent stuff like this. Um, and again, we don't know kind of what went through the officers, thought processes as everything unfolded with
Yeah.
Mr. Blake, because that his testimony has not been released by the DOJ yet.
Right.
But you know, you know, did you, we always looked at it this way. When I worked in corrections and we were we had somebody in violation of their supervision, and they were getting agitated and very aggressive just in the lobby before we were going to take them into custody.
Right.
And our thought process always went to, does the person have to go to jail right now? And I think that's always needs to be the first question that should come to anybody's mind when you're talking about taking somebody's freedom away. Does it have to be this instant?
Yeah.
I know, and again, I'm going off of information that is public. There's a lot of information that's not public. Mr. Blake did have a court warrant out for some pending charges. The couple at least one felony, and things. What it was is that he was the charges were filed with the court, but he hasn't been in front of the judge yet to be officially charged. But he
Sure.
did he did not appear for that first appearance, so he issued kind of like a bench warrant.
Right.
Um, you know, and in that situation, and again, I'm going off of my experience. I'm not a law enforcement, was never a law enforcement officer as a probation parole agent, but if an individual showed up with in the office with their girlfriend and their two kids, and it was really rowdy in there, and he was getting upset and agitated because he kind of knew in the back of his mind that he was going to jail.
Mm-hmm.
Our first thing was, do we have to take him right now? Because we're gonna have to deal with a very agitated, aggressive individual, possibly go hands on, take him to the ground, cuff him, and then still struggle to get him into the transport vehicle to the jail. On top
Mm-hmm.
of that, now you have girlfriend who knows where our vehicles are, is probably going to go out there and meet us before we get him in the vehicle with two children. Or can we wait and take him in at a later time? That's and again, I don't know if that's how every agency is different, and that's why I agree with there needs to be national standards on
Yeah.
training and how to approach situations. And so I don't know if that went through. I get it. There's possibly, I'm going to go possibly because there's some mixed reports whether or not there was an active restraining order between him and his girlfriend where he was at the residence. I don't know. Again, I'm going off of information I read. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
You know, but was it just that he was there, or did he possibly commit a new crime? If he was just there and you make contact with him, you attempt to take him into custody, and he's that aggressive and agitated, there's children in the vehicle. Was it that necessary to have to take him in at that point? Or could you just let him
Right.
go? You have the vehicle information.
Right.
He's going to be back at that residence because those are her children. Or was he not supposed to have the children? Again, those are the things that we don't know. But I'm
Yeah.
going based off of
Yep.
kind of my thought process, how my thought process would have been. Because if if he was okay to have those children and there was not a violent crime that had occurred or the threat, of somebody getting hurt immediately,
Mm-hmm.
you could let him leave the scene. The vehicle, and take them into custody when like the children are wrong. Yeah, that's an issue that I have.
Right.
The children were in the vehicle, and and again, there's so many things, and I don't want to
Yeah.
muddy the
There's a lot
water.
of things we just don't know at this point about that. Yeah.
So
Yep.
there's some parts of that I'm just like, man, there's a different way that could have been handled. I agree with that,
Right.
but they made the decision, to continue to go hands on to try to detain him, and then he had a weapon.
Right.
So I understand.
And
Okay,
yep.
I get it. So I get both sides, and people, there are people there. You can't do that. You have to pick a side. No, I don't. I can
Yeah.
agree with both sides here because I agree. There's circumstances on both sides where okay,
That's the
it makes
problem
sense.
with our society right now is that it's so polarized. Like you have to say it's one way or the other.
Right.
And life is just not like that. And I can see that too. I mean, I can see again, like we were talking about, what should the officers have done, and maybe you're identifying a need for change in the way that the training is there for all law enforcement in from the very beginning, from the very all overall, just it needs to change. But yeah, and I can say, okay, look, I mean, they're human beings. They have to respond as human beings, training or not. No matter how many years they've been doing it, they're still human beings and they react as human beings. And I think
Mm-hmm.
you have to ask yourself how you would react in that
Right.
situation. On the flip side, I don't think I would have used the excessive
Right.
amount of force to me that it was excessive.
Right.
I don't think I
And
would
I
have done
think
it. So
we agree on that. I don't
yeah,
think you're going
yep,
to find
yep.
unless other information comes out, that warrants him discharging the
Right. I
firearm
mean,
several
like,
times.
he's reaching for a rocket launcher in his car, but I mean, obviously, I don't
Right.
think that was the case.
And
So,
again,
yeah,
it hasn't been reported how many of the shots struck Mr. Blake. And
right,
so
right.
that's why I'm like, as of right now, the information I have, that he fired way too many shots.
Yes.
But now if it
Yeah,
comes out where he missed 6 of the 7 shots and he hit them once,
right.
okay, I get it. You
It's just a really bad shot. I mean, I don't
right.
know. I don't know, but yeah.
If you keep your job, you really need to get to the shooting range then, because you're point blank range and you missed them 6 out of 7 times. I don't
Yeah,
think that's the
yeah. But
case. I'm
we just
assuming
don't, yeah, we don't know. Yeah,
I'm assuming he missed a couple of times because, like I said, he's point blank range. Point blank
yeah,
range. Um, I don't know what weapon they use, but most law enforcement uses um, Glock 17s, Glock 19s,
yeah, yep.
um, and that close shooting a Glock 9 millimeter, that close range. And if you strike somebody 6 times, they are not surviving, or 7 times. I'm sorry,
Hmm.
they probably do not survive. So I'm assuming a few shots missed. Not saying that he wasn't hit multiple times. So again, don't jump down my throat, people. Okay, I'm not saying that. What I'm just saying is, again, this is speculation, because, and I don't know
Yeah,
if that
yeah,
part of it will ever be released unless Mr. Blake and his attorney and family come out and say, yeah, he was shot X number of times. I'm sure his attorney said, we're not going to talk about how many times he was shot because he was shot. One time is one too
yeah.
many. And again, that's where the debate is.
Right.
Like you said, we're all humans. We all have to react to a situation. And you have to put yourself in the officer's shoes. Um, is how would you react if somebody is just resisted you, fought you off, you tried to tase him, and that didn't work, and now he's bending over in a vehicle picking up an object you're not sure what it is. You know,
Right.
it, and again, and so that's the law enforcement. Now, on the other side, like you said, Lone Wolf, if
Hmm.
you and an African American individual are going down the road, you're both speeding at the same time. Unfortunately, and this is where the change needs to happen.
Right.
Unfortunately, the African American individual is probably going to get pulled over more likely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I agree with that. And I'm not saying
Hmm.
that's right. That unfortunately is one of the problems with our law enforcement system. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. It
here's the
is
thing.
sad.
But now here's the thing. Taking that part of it out of the equation, any of us that get pulled over, that no matter what we have in our life, you get pulled over. If an officer asks you to get out of the car, what are you going to do? Get out of the
Right. I
car.
mean, you get out of the
You,
car.
you
Right.
you're
Yeah.
going to
Exactly. Yeah.
follow the directives of the officer, whether they're in the right or the wrong. For some reason, they want to search you. They need to detain you. Whatever it is. And, and,
Hmm.
and I understand people would be like, well, that's part of the systemic racism, blah, blah. But here's the thing. if it is found that it is an illegal detention and an illegal search of your vehicle, they
Right.
now are liable for lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
That is when, and that's how you affect change, is by
Mm-hmm.
if they do stuff like that. That is when there's the opportunity to affect change. Again, these are horrible situations when individuals get shot, hurt, and killed. I
Right.
don't think
Right.
anybody would disagree with that.
Right. And I don't think anybody advocates for that.
Right.
And if there are a few people out there that say, "Yep, just do that," then
Yeah, you
I hate to
got some
say it,
problems.
we have to. Yeah, you're wrong. I
Yeah.
mean, hate to say that, but hey, sarcasm. You're wrong. You're wrong.
Yeah, you're
So
wrong. So, and we can talk about change when those occur, but again, I think the better times for the change is when there are the pulling over individuals because of their their race,
hmm
detaining them and searching their vehicles on traffic stops because of their race and the prejudice that you have, lying underneath that you may not think you have. That is the time that should be publicized, and that's when change can happen. Because unfortunately, in this situation, Mr. Blake did resist arrest. So that's when you
yeah,
bring up the other side can sit there and say, well, this is what he did. And again, I'm not saying that the other side is right. I'm not saying either side is right or wrong here. What I'm
hmm
bringing up is there you now give ammunition to the other side to de- debunk that law enforcement did this because he was African American. If an African
yeah,
American individual is driving down the road, they're going four over, they get pulled over, detained, their car gets searched, they find nothing in it. They now have something.
right.
They
Right.
followed the law.
For a 4 mile an hour
Right,
over the speed limit, it should be
right,
either a warning or a ticket that's appropriate to that, not a search and seizure.
right.
And you can say, "Oh, we had cause," and what it just doesn't warrant that kind of that kind of
But
thing to happen.
but wouldn't you agree? Those are the things. If you publicize those things,
Yeah.
you can affect a lot more change because you get a lot more people be like, yeah, I go 5 to 8 over and don't get pulled over.
All the time, exactly, and it's bull crap. That's what people
Right,
would say, and
right,
yeah, and
exactly.
it needs to,
So
yeah.
so
There's no
you know,
that's to me that's also it's excessive, but nobody got hurt.
right. It
It was like nobody got hurt or injured or killed because of it, but
there
all of
there
those
there
things happen constantly, and they need to go away.
right. And the reason I bring that up is that because the individual followed the instructions of the officer, but
Mm-hmm.
the detention and the search was still illegal, even though they
Right.
followed the instructions. Now that side that doesn't want to always believe that cops do things, that there are some bad apples out there.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have any ammunition to come back and say, well, he was doing this, that's why he did that. No, the guy was going about 4 miles over the speed limit. They pulled him over. He cooperated to the full extent. They still cuffed him, put him in the back of the car, and searched his car.
Right.
How is that legal? And they found nothing in the
Yeah.
car.
Right. There's nothing legal about that at all. Exactly.
Right, there's
Yeah.
nothing legal about
Yeah.
that. But
Right. Not at
because the
all. Yep.
individual followed the directions of the law enforcement officer, the other side now doesn't have ammunition to come and say, no, that this is why this happened.
Yeah. Yep.
And I know for some people you're going to be upset with me saying that, but that is those are the types of incidents that need to be publicized so change can happen. Because
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, when you have somebody resisting arrest and something like this happens, the other side can come back and say, well, there's X, Y, and Z. There's other circumstances. In the other situation that I just brought up, there are no other circumstances.
Right.
There
Right.
is nothing.
Yeah, and how often does that happen? I mean,
Probably
probably
a
more than it should.
probably a lot, and it just doesn't
Yeah.
get reported because those individuals are like, they're not going to do anything about it. Yeah, because we're not
Yeah.
publicizing it. We're not reporting it.
Yeah.
We're only reporting the real bad stuff. We should be
Well, and
reporting
it's not sensational enough for the news
right,
media, which is another unfortunate thing. I think, sometimes for some news media outlets, they want to report things that are sensational. So,
right, right.
in their eyes, that are headline grabbing, Yeah.
And that's the thing. Unfortunately, and I don't think media's helping out getting any change. I think they are in it just for ratings.
Yeah.
I don't trust any media outlets. That's how you have to get news. But I'll tell you what, I don't care where you are on the political spectrum. There's none of them you can 100%. If you say, oh yeah,
Yeah.
CNN is 100% right, Fox is 100% right, you guys are loony bins because none of them are
No, none of
100%
them are
right.
100%
None of
right.
them.
No, not at
None of them.
all. No.
None of them.
No.
So if you trust
Just
those
one
types of media,
source for all your news.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know, there are news outlets I don't like listening to, but I do because you have to get every perspective because
Right.
even if you don't agree with it, they might give you a perspective that you're like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. That's not what
Sure.
they said over here, but that makes a little bit of sense. And,
Right.
and
And
that's
it's not
where
what you may have thought of either.
right.
Yeah.
And that's where again, the media is not helping out any of this situation, because, you
Yeah.
know,
It tends to be
again,
inflammatory. Yeah.
you have media sources on both sides that are trying to run a narrative, trying to get ratings, and they're not. I don't believe that they really care if change happens. Um, Again, people can be mad at me if they want. I'm not saying that change shouldn't happen. Change needs to happen. There needs to be
Right.
change in the way things are done. I don't dispute that. People getting hurt, people getting killed. I don't agree with that.
Right.
Unfortunately, it happens, and it's going to continue to happen. I don't think we're ever going to get rid of this. People say we have to get rid of it. I agree. It'd be great to say this is never going to happen again.
Right.
But let's be honest, Lone Wolf, that we're never going to 100% be rid of stuff like this. But we can mitigate and lessen the frequency by making smart, positive changes. I say smart
Right.
is because getting rid of law enforcement is not smart.
That's not a smart choice. No, that's
Because
anarchy again. We talked about it's just not
yeah,
a viable
it,
solution
you have to have law enforcement for society to function,
as a
um,
lawful society.
as a lawful society.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, if you want
and
an unlawful society, I guess then then go for it. But we want a
yeah,
lawful society. Everybody wants one, but you want it to
right,
be equitable.
right,
So
and that's
that's
the
where those
thing.
changes need to happen. Yep. Yep.
Um, and I do think though, um, it goes to our elected officials, to celebrities, to influential individuals. They need to stop making these comments before all the facts are out.
Right.
And
Or
I'm going to
even,
end
if they make a comment, like we're talking about some of this stuff right now, and we're saying, look, this is our opinion based on what we know. But we
right.
do not know all the information because it hasn't all been released yet. So we can say what we know based on that. However, if you make a
It
comment
can change.
offhand, you might want to just say, hey, look. Yeah, and that's the other thing too. Look, people can change their opinions. Holy crap. People can change their opinions. I, I, there's some reason that the media will just attack like a pack of wild hyenas when somebody says, I think this. And then, a couple days later, there's more information released and they change their mind. You would have thought that somebody dropped an A bomb the
Right.
way that the media will jump on them and be like, look, he changed his mind. He's not allowed to change his mind. Who does he think he is? Or who does she think she is? She's a human being. She's allowed to change her
Right.
mind.
You,
Why is that wrong? you
like
know?
again, and like we brought up, the informed, making an informed statement.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, our governor, whether you agree with his policies or not, I think his comments were ill-advised. Again, just a blanket comment of that this is a a horrible situation. Our prayers go out to the individual and his family. We're doing an
sure.
investigation. We don't have all the details yet. You can say the officers were put on administrative leave per policy, blah blah blah. You can say the factual stuff, but don't come
Mm-hmm.
and. I mean, basically, he came out and said that the officer shot him for no reason. I mean, that was the tone that I got from the governor's statement,
Right.
and maybe that's not the tone you got, but again, it's just one of those things where it's just like, why? You're the governor of the state. Just make a blanket statement. Wait for the facts. And that's what
Yeah.
I really, hopefully, the people that listen to this, they wait till the end, because again, I'm all for the changing, and I feel horrible for when people get killed and are injured because of violent, law enforcement officers shooting individuals. Some are just, some are not just shootings. But my problem is we get the people that are influential make statements without all the information and then get the public whipped up into a frenzy, which takes them from a peaceful protest to rioters and looters.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And that's the
our
problem.
justice system is meant to work a certain way, and unfortunately people tend to look at mob mentality a lot of times as that's the way it should be with justice. We don't live in the old west. We aren't going to hang people. We don't really do that anymore. I'm sorry if some people think that
Well,
that's the way we should do it. It's just
eh,
not the way we do it. So um,
unfortunately, well, if you look around the country, Minneapolis, Kenosha,
yeah.
Chicago, Portland. I mean, it's almost like the Wild Wild West. I mean, seriously,
Yeah,
Portland's been
yeah,
rioting for almost 3 months.
right,
I,
right.
and again, people see that, and then they're like, "Why do I want to even pay attention to this anymore?"
Yeah,
It,
yeah. You get a
it,
little turned
it,
off by that. Yeah.
and that's the thing. So, um, I mean, do you have anything else, Lone Wolf? I mean,
No,
you know,
I honestly I think that this is one of those things we got onto this topic because it's kind of pervasive throughout the world of everything. so
yeah, yeah,
our world and throughout the world of sports, and so I think we've made our points on this, and what I would say is I'm hoping that we can return more to action on sports, and not that these issues aren't important, but for us, I think it was incumbent upon us to touch upon this situation in this show. But hopefully, for our sakes, as this show, we'll talk more about sports in the next week. That would be the way I'd want to go with it. And that's I think you agree there. And there's other podcasts if people want, political things and social things and things of that nature that they want to get into. So
right, exactly. And like you said, with how, I guess, encompassing that the situation that occurred in Kenosha did to the world of sport, we needed to take a show and talk about this stuff. Well,
Yeah, yeah,
and we talked about it a little. We didn't even really talk about it this extensively. With the George Floyd incident, we touched
right.
upon it. But but it didn't have as big of an impact on sport at that time because it was just starting to get started again. I mean, this led to almost the cancellation of the rest of the NBA season. Thankfully,
Yes,
it
that's true.
didn't.
Yeah, so it was
Yeah,
impactful, and it was really something we had to address because yes, it almost ended a season that was just basically starting, and kind of getting
right.
underway. So yeah, yep,
So like you said, hopefully, we don't have any more of these incidents, come up, um, and we can return back to our normal all sports programming, um,
right.
next week. And I think, you know, uh, we'll have to start previewing NFL,
Yeah, it's
next
coming up
week.
soon here. Yeah.
So we'll preview week one. I know I had my fantasy draft this week, so we can talk about my roster and let
Sure.
you rip it apart, Lone Wolf. Uh,
I'd be glad to oblige you in that regard. Yeah.
and then we'll update everybody on the NHL. Of course, Major League Baseball, our favorite sport. Um,
Yes.
and then the NBA playoffs. We should be into round two, by the next show. Um, and then we will we will oblige your father next week.
Yeah, we'll
Um,
talk about the
and,
WIA and sports in
we'll talk
Wisconsin
about
in
high
particular. Yeah.
high school sports in the state of Wisconsin and kind of how I'm going to be politically correct because I coach here and I have to be careful with what I say.
Right.
um,
It's part of your job
how
here. Yeah.
how interesting it has been, um, with the decision to kind of play sports in the fall and kind of not. I'm just going to leave it at that. You have to tune in next week or listen to next week's show after we post it to really
Right.
get what I'm saying there. I'm just going to say it's interesting. I have some other comments,
Thoughts
but
about it. Yep.
Lone Wolf, we can talk on the phone about that, and I know
Yeah.
you're,
That's
you or maybe we can do a Zoom call with me, you, and your dad, and we 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 can chat about it.
right.
So, um, but yeah, so I think I know I am
We've exhausted
mental.
that topic, I
I
believe. Yes.
I believe I am mentally done for this show. I think we hit on a lot of good points. And
Definitely.
again, hopefully everybody understands that we are looking at it from all perspectives. Um, and I hope when I speak for you, Lone Wolf, I'm kind of I'm speaking right. Is that we
Yeah.
both agree that there needs to be change, but at the same
Yeah.
time, we have to make sure we have all the facts before we go out and do things that are going to harm our communities, which
Right.
unfortunately has happened quite a bit here, um, which is going to have long-term negative impacts, because a lot of these communities there were small businesses that are being impacted, not the large chains. And that's
Yeah.
only helping the large chains out because that's where people are going to go now. They aren't going to be able to go to the mom and pop shops. So, um,
Well, right. Because they can afford to continue their operations in those
right.
situations in most
Right.
cases. So yeah.
If one of their chain stores closes for a little bit, they'll another store will just pick up their business.
Yeah. They'll make
So,
do. Yeah.
but
So
again, any last words, Lone Wolf?
I will just say that I think it was necessary, but for us to talk about this. But yes, I'm hoping that next week we can delve back into the world of sports more fully, and I'm looking forward to that.
All right. Again, thank you everybody that stopped in, listened, live, and anybody that will be listening on the taped show. You can listen to us here on Podbean Live for at least a couple of weeks. We only keep our 3 most recent shows on there because of storage limitations, but you can
Right.
catch all of our shows all the way back to our very first show over on YouTube at Smack Talk Live or Smack Talk, sorry, not Smack Talk Live, Smack Talk on YouTube. All the other information is in our bio. If you'd like to drop us a line because you want to be part of the show, shoot us an email and we can arrange to get you on the show. I know Lone Wolf, my brother has talked about possibly doing a joint show with him
Right.
in his show. So that is something that we are working on to kind of broaden both shows' horizons a little bit.
Sure.
So again, thank you everybody. Have a good night. Have a good week. Be safe, and we will talk to you next week.
Next week. Yep. Have a good one.